Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Daniel, and I'm joined by my business partner, Alex, as well. We are here at Spherium Consulting Group, excited to share best practices on top ways to secure Office 365 for your remote organization. Alex has an extensive experience in managing various systems, part of Microsoft Azure domain, and he will be leading today's presentation. We'll be taking questions during the session, and we'll also have a Q&A session at the end. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions you might have. Alex, I'm going to make you the presenter and handing the mic over to you.
Sure, perfect. Thank you. Okay. All right. Where's okay? Am I presenting?
Yes, you should have the presenter right here.
1 second. Okay, here we go. Mic check, 1, 2. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's get with it. So today, basically, I mean, what's going to happen is we'll talk about a few security features. Some of them are advanced, some of them actually available from out of the box with Office 365 subscriptions. So I must talk a little bit about the situation lately in IT. With the COVID crisis, a lot of companies actually got behind the 8 ball on being remote ready, right? Being basically 100% telecommuting company. And some of them actually searched to migrate to get on Teams, to migrate the email to Office 365, etc. And we do upload for them, but actually not a lot of companies and not a lot of MSPs actually that done migration. They do due diligence and set up the security features actually that already there. So today I'll start actually talking about a few security tools that are available in Office 365. And like I said, the beauty of it is they are Office 365 tools, which basically means they're already available. You just need to turn them on, or you need to buy a separate subscription and turn them on. You don't need to deal with multiple vendors. Like for instance, in the case of the MCAS, McAfee, etc., right? They're already there. You just need to go into Portal, you just need to turn them on, and you need to know how to use them. Another bright side of things is actually Microsoft is investing billions into the cloud security infrastructure. And in particular, the sort of golden child of it is Office 365. And basically, the security improves on a day-to-day basis. There's no new features involved, and the spam filter and attack protection and everything else is basically becoming better and better. With that said, actually, Office 365 security is a beast. Actually, it has a lot of tools. It's not possible physically for me to get everything covered today. That's why we actually hope that that's just the inception of our discussion, and we can have more things about other security features that I find amazing and exciting. So we'll start with some basic features, as I mentioned. We'll start with the DLP and retention, which is the feature which is available with almost any Office 365 subscriptions. You just need to know how to use it. You just need to know where to turn this on, and that will actually make you a lot more secure than most businesses. And then actually I'll follow up. We'll talk about Office ATP, basically Office ATP, which we'll go over today. In particular, we'll talk about 2 different tools, which is safe links and safe attachments. Now that tool actually will require a little bit of advanced subscription, but once again, it's really easy to configure. You just need to know how to use it. And I hope to finish up with giving you guys a sort of a teaser on another thing that I greatly want to talk about, which is MCAS, which stands for Microsoft Cloud Application Security, and that's a great tool. Potentially, this tool can replace 80% of your on-prem security equipment. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Let's get started with DLP. So DLP stands for data loss prevention. Basically, the main purpose of this thing is to prevent accidental or purposeful sharing of the sensitive data, right? And each company, actually, each business is unique, and each business must decide which data is there to be shared and which data is not to be shared, right? And Office 365 actually has a built-in mechanism for that, which is the DLP. Probably, if you asked me about 3 or 4 years ago, I'd say that Exchange was the most popular communication platform in Office 365, right? The Skype for Business was just picking up, and it was not really meant. I mean, it was just meant for the chatting calls. But lately, actually, Teams and Teams has become basically taking a lot of workloads from the email and workloads from the Skype for Business. So it's both for the voice calls, real-time chatting, and document sharing. And then we actually have 2 other platforms, which is OneDrive and SharePoint. SharePoint has been around forever, and OneDrive has also been around forever, but they also play into the Teams. Why? Because in Teams, whenever we actually share the document with the entire team, in reality it's a SharePoint library. And if we have a one-to-one conversation with somebody outside of the team and we share the document, that actually goes to OneDrive for Business. As a matter of fact, actually, the amount of shared attachments via Outlook has drastically reduced, because a smart way to do it is just to share the document from the OneDrive to the SharePoint, and that will actually give you assurance that there are no multiple copies of the same document, right? You will work off the same document, right? So DLP must also actually cover those platforms as well. Once again, so when I actually talk about the DLP, I must define what is the critical data that I absolutely may not share with people from outside of my organization. And the answer to this is basically depends on the business. It depends on the compliance that you're held up against. For instance, if you're HIPAA compliant, if you GDPR compliant, if you have any financial restrictions, etc., right? So Office 365 actually has some predefined data types that are already built in. So things like social security numbers, credit card numbers, bank account numbers, etc. Okay, so I think I've done enough talking. Let's actually go to the portal and let's take a look at a few things. So here I am. I can go to protection.office.com. Alternatively, I can get there from admin.microsoft.com and go to security. And I'm actually going to select data loss prevention, DLP. Perfect. All right. So the reason I created this policy, because when working with Office 365 or anything Azure, you actually need to make sure that the changes and effects are not happening instantaneously. It takes a little bit. Actually, it takes 24 hours or a few days actually for the policy to take effect. That's why I actually had to pre-build one for this particular presentation. But we can still go in and kind of like look at the make and bones of this policy and what settings I used. So let's take a look. So here, I mean, this is a very basic policy, and it covers every single communication platform, starting with good old Exchange Online with emails, then a SharePoint Online, then it goes to the OneDrive, and it also covers team chats, right? So why there are no team storage? Because team storage in reality is the SharePoint, and like I said, and if you have a one-to-one chat with somebody, that's a OneDrive for Business. I mean, that's a OneDrive storage. So I've done, I included this all, which may not be the case for some businesses. You may want to use some more advanced things, right? Because if you restricting too many things, there is a good chance that you will stop some business. close that. So another thing is actually if we go to the Patriot Act settings, so basically here I said any of these types show up, and this is actually a predefined rule called CS Patriot Act. Anything that looks like a credit card number, anything that looks like a bank account number or social security number, that's when the rule will take an action. So let me go to edit rule and I'll show you guys a little bit more settings here. Okay, so first of all, here basically I'm saying the number of occurrences. So this particular settings is telling me if I have more than a single occurrence, then the rule should execute. Another important setting here is actually the accuracy. So how positive is Office 365 need to be to actually execute the rule? And for some things that you see, I have an accuracy of, it needs to be 85% sure. But for some other things, it can be 70% sure. As all this in security, you actually playing this game, convenience versus security, right? If I slide down the minimum required accuracy to say 60% or 50%, I mean, I will actually, the rule will execute a lot, but I will end up with a lot of false positives, right? If I slide this up the minimum accuracy to say 90% or 95%, you know, the chances of the false positive will be very slim, but I may miss something, basically. I may miss an important information that just comes in a slightly different format. Okay. All right, so that's how those policies are made. Once again, you define where those policies applied. And as you can see, there are two kinds. There's low volume and a high volume. So why there are two of them is basically I may choose to have a different action if I have a lot of occurrences of, a lot of triggers for this particular rule. And I might choose a harsher actions for the high volume. That's why. Okay, let me close this. Daniel, do we have any questions or am I clear to proceed?
I think, yeah. Alex, yeah, I think you're good to proceed. And then now, if you want to demonstrate.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, let's just see this policy in action. So I'm going to go to my account.
Teams and also the SharePoint online. Yep.
Excellent. So I'm actually going to create a new message, and I'm going to send an email to Daniel's account. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually one second. Just have some pre-built number. Okay. And I'm blocked from sending this because it's actually saying that it basically detected a sensitive data on the fly. And basically tell me that I'm not allowed to send this data to anybody who's outside of this organization. So that's a DLP in action. Let's see what it does for a Teams chat. Okay, so here I actually define the team, and I have invited an outside account. As you can see, this particular account is listed as guest. And what I'm going to do the same thing. I'm actually going to attempt, I mean, basically, since team and the chat actually contains the people from within and from outside of my organization, I'm going to actually attempt to stick in the data that will trigger the DLP response. Okay, so the data is sent. And lo and behold, I'm getting a message saying that somebody tried to post is sensitive information that has been defined by the rule with confidence level of 85%. And right away, you can see that the message is blocked. So basically, if Daniel would open this on his end, he would not be able to read this message. So that's DLP for you.
And Alex, if you want to also show the SharePoint file handling as well.
Yep. So as I mentioned, basically, I mean, I've done it for the real-time things, such as email messages and the chats, but also we have to make sure that actually that there is a another side of things. I mean, the sensitive data doesn't have to be contained in basically in emails or chats. It also can be contained in a document that we can share with somebody from outside of our organization. And in this particular case, the SharePoint DLP will get triggered as well. So I'm going to go into the files. Okay. And here actually I have the document that has, that has a pattern that is recognized to be a sensitive data, something of a social security format as well. So I'm going to go and open this in the SharePoint and say I want to share this. Okay, I'm to secure for my own good, being triggered for. Okay, here I am. All right, so, and right here you can basically see that this data is protected. Why? Because the DLP has actually identified this as non-shareable. It has a little cross to it. Can you guys see it? Can people see it, you think?
I think
so
if you have already.
Yeah, if you hover, yes. If I hover, it actually gets closed, but right there, you can actually, right next to the 3 hours, it has a little like stop sign, which basically means it's protected and unshareable to people from outside of your organization, right? So if I attempt to share it, and I'm actually, now let's see. Okay, here it is. And it tells me that it contains sensitive information that cannot be shared to people from outside of my organization. Doesn't even actually let me click through it. Doesn't make me copy the link or anything. So that's the DLP on the static data. That's DLP actually on anything that supports, like any format that supports DLP. And this is pretty much all Microsoft related documents. Okay. All right, moving right along. Just want to check in with the group. Does anybody have any questions or anything you want me to dive deeper? Because I mean, primarily this is your presentation. If there's anything that you think we need to cover that I'm not covering, I'm all here for you. I'll try to answer it to the best of my knowledge.
And just to add, if anybody wants to write questions in the webinar kind of window, you can, or you can ask as well. So and we'll also have a quick Q&A session at the end of the session.
All right, so as I mentioned, some tools are free and some tools are basically there for you. So as soon as you get like your first Office subscription, the first thing you want to do, you want to configure DLP. But if you want to go slightly and a few other things, which I can cover in my several sessions, we'll talk about email protections, default spam protection, default DKIM protection, and so forth. But here I'm actually going to, because I'm picking and choosing what I'm going to talk about, we'll actually talk about the protection that is sort of on the advanced side, which basically means you need to pay extra for it. And the one I'm going to talk about is actually Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, ATP. Term that you probably heard a lot, and it can refer to 3 different things. It can refer to Defender ATP. It can refer to, which is an additional extension to monitor your endpoints. Also, there is Azure ATP, and that is something that is installed on your on-premise domain controllers and actually is giving you insight into what's going on into your on-prem world. And there is Office ATP, Office Advanced Threat Protection. So this particular tool is available as add-on to something like M365 A3 license. It's $5 per user. And it's also part of M365 E5 and M365 A3 security, right? So two things I'm going to show you guys are safe attachments and safe links. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at basically how these policies are made, and let's take a look at a few options I have. So I'm gonna go to threat management dashboard. It's a way to get there. There are multiple ways how to get there, but I'm just using the ones I'm most comfortable with. Let's take a look at the safe attachments. So the point actually I wanna talk about here is one of these options. So basically there is off, there is monitor, there is block, replace, and there is dynamic delivery. So I'm picking dynamic delivery because this is one of the most popular options. So basically with dynamic delivery, end user gets the email with attachment, but he gets the warning saying that the attachment is currently being scanned. Reality is attachment is actually uploaded to isolated virtual environment and it's scanned for all common threats. And if attachment is proven to be safe, it just reappears on the email just like it would. If it hasn't been scanned yet, the user will see for the time being, depending on how Office 365 is busy, he'll get the message saying that, we're currently scanning, this is the body of the message, but we're still scanning the attachments. So I'm actually going to use my outside account and I'm going to send myself an email. To get you guys a better idea how it works.
And while you're doing that, Alex, I assume one of these options that you are reviewing, that just depends on how your information structure is configured in a given company, because you might want to block it completely,
Yep,
right?
exactly,
or you might want to deliver it. So it really depends on your organization compliance.
Dynamic delivery, though, I mean, I think to me it's the best option because it gives you the body of the message right away. I'm just actually working on sending myself an email right now.
Exactly.
Some attachments. And I'm going to actually attach a few things here. Just bear with me a little bit. Okay. Going to click send, and I'm gonna go back to my Outlook. And let's take a look at what's happening here. So just to give you guys a reminder, I mean, this is basically barely scratching the surface. There's a lot of intricacies with those settings, and I mean, they're very configurable, and you really need to have a good insight. So as you guys can see right now, it tells me that the ATP scan is in progress, which basically makes it undownloadable until the ATP, until Office 365 actually does all the necessary scans and tells me that it's safe. Right, and right now, basically, I mean, I think it was under a minute even. The PDFs have reappeared here. All right, so, and that's the idea. You see the body of the message right away, but it tells you actually, that it's still an ATP scan. And that sometimes is actually just a better for the customer handling. Say, for instance, if I feel like if you expect a document from your lawyer, from your accountant, and it takes a while for ATP to scan it because it's busy, you just sit without the message for a while. With this particular setting, I mean, it basically delivers the body and tells you that the scan is in progress. So okay, let's take a look. Next we'll talk about the safe links. So once again, why is links and attachment important? Because pretty much 95% of network exploits, they actually come from the email. and user either clicks on a bad link, or it's basically uploading the attachment which has actually bad code in this. And that's how you penetrate the network, and that's how the lateral movement starts. So let's take a look at how you can actually protect people from clicking on their own attachments. So I'm gonna go back here. And I'm actually gonna go to the safe links. And let's take a look here. Here, basically, I've added the URL that we deemed to be malicious. And also, Office 365 actually keeps track of all potential malicious URLs, and they're being scanned in real time. And the malicious URLs are being redirected. And I'll show you how the redirect happens. And here, actually, one of the critical settings, I'm not going to go through all of them, is I select do not let users to click through the safe links of the original URL. Alternatively, I can uncheck this, and user basically will click despite of the warning. So let me actually show this in action so you guys understand a little bit more how it happens. Let's see. So Daniel actually was kind enough to send me something yesterday, and it actually has our website on the blocked list. I'm not sure why we would do it, but hey, no judgment here. If I click on the link, it basically tells me that our organization has blocked the URL. And once again, it works with the static blocking when you know the certain site to be a known security risk. And at the same time, it actually happens with every single link is actually being scanned by the machine learning. And if the link is actually deemed to be unsafe, it will be redirected. If the link is safe, nothing will happen to it. So it doesn't do any weird things like my MCAS, for instance. I mean, basically, if the link is safe, you're not being rewritten. Okay. So, all right. So I'm very good at checkpoint. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
We're good for now.
We're good for now. Okay. Excellent. 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 All right. All right. Hold on a sec. Let's keep going. All right, so another big thing in IT, and actually on anybody who has been migrated from on-prem environment to the cloud-based or considered to be migrated, is the questions that we hear the most often is, do I need to back up? Do I need to back up Exchange? Do I need to back up Exchange Online? Do I need to back up SharePoint Online? Right? In a lot of cases, we say, no, you don't have to, because by default there is because we can configure the retention policy. But the bigger concern here is the compliance, because a lot of businesses are being imposed mandatory retention of the certain data for 7 years, for 8 years, for 5 years, etc. Right? And if you're being audited, the auditor will actually ask you to provide the proof that no data is being deleted until 5 years old. Alternatively, sometimes it's not in the business best interest to keep all data for too long, because say for instance, if my legal hold is for 7 years, it's not in my best interest to actually hold it for 8 years, because somebody comes up with a legal case, I'm legally not obligated to keep this data. And there's also there's also the matter of space, because all retained data, all the deleted data actually does factor into overall, say for instance, SharePoint site size, right? And you will get charged for it. So once again, depending on the needs, there are a few ways how you can configure retention policy. Retention policy actually once again spans across all communicational platforms, Teams, Exchange, OneDrive, and SharePoint. And there are a few ways, I mean, there are many ways to configure retention. I'm going to actually dive into some of them and give you some ideas on what we're looking at. Okay, all right, looks like I got a lot of sites here. So we're gonna go here, we're gonna go into information governance, and we're gonna go right into the retention, okay? And there are some policies which apply to entire organization and basically are specifically auto-applied to either entire organization or selected people. Alternatively, you can distribute label to people, which once again, they can use it to label data with a certain retention rules at their discretion, or some of it will be automatically labeled based on the sensitive data. Okay, so let's click at that, at this policy right here. And this particular policy actually covers all locations. And there are a few settings actually that we can talk about. Just 1 second, guys. I don't think I'm in the right place. Let me actually start a new policy so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Okay. I'm not even going to save this particular sample. I'm just going to show you guys the options available here. Okay, so what I wanted to show you is there are two kinds of retention policies. I mean, the first retention policy is retain only, right? The second, retain for a certain amount of time but delete after. And the another one is basically just make sure that you don't keep any old data. Is basically definitely delete something out of your storage that's older than a certain amount of time, like 2 years, 3 years, 7 years, whatever it is. Okay, so if I would pick this set of options, and I can say basically from modified or created, I'm going to say anything that basically, I mean, keep everything that has been modified within last 7 years. And I'm saying I don't want to really delete it after. Basically, it will just stay there forever until it will stay there forever until I manually delete it. So once the 7 years pass, it will not be automatically deleted, but it will make it deletable manually. On the other hand, I can say, yes, delete it right after, which basically means 7 years pass, and whether the data is active or not active, whether this is contained in a preservation hold, or it's in the main library of the SharePoint, it will get deleted, right? So once again, what are the reasons for it? Because it may be in the best interest of business to keep the data for too long for the liability reasons. And I mean, basically data does take up the space, and the space will cost you money. So that's pretty clear. Alternatively, I can go with this option, and I say delete the contact that is older than, for instance, 2 years. And it doesn't care about that. It doesn't care about preserving this. Just go ahead and delete it. So it doesn't do any retention. So I'd say basically this particular option gives me exactly 7 years for the document to live from the last time it's modified. This one assures that it's not deletable for 7 years, but in reality, if it's untouched, it can stay in the system forever. And this one, I'm going to use the same number. We'll make sure that if the document is untouched for 7 years, it will get deleted. and it doesn't actually, but it doesn't preserve it. It doesn't make it. It doesn't preserve it for 7 years. You can delete it if the policy applies to the document. So once again, next we're gonna take a look at all locations, and that's everything that's available. I can just do, for instance, a separate retention for Exchange, separate Exchange for SharePoint, OneDrive, Office 365's groups, etc. I can do it for all users. I can apply just to the group. So there's a lot of bells and whistles to configure here. So another thing is actually I can say, I can do some custom settings. And I can say, okay, only do it if it don't retain all data, but go to the patterns, like look for financial patterns, look for the medical patterns, look for, personally identifiable data, etc. So very similar to what we were dealing with the DLP. And that's a good thing about Office 365. It has those predefined data types. Okay. So that's a policy that's kind of being imposed of majority organization. Another thing we can do, we can actually do what is called retention labels, and the retention labels will be published to the end users for them to market themselves.
And those, Alex, just a question, those show up, you could use
and basically those guys will have.
Right, and I'm just asking a question, and those labels can later be used by users in Exchange or in SharePoint, correct?
Yes, Exchange and SharePoint, whatever you define the label setting is, because once again they have the same location. So, and what you need to do, you need to create it using the same rules as we did with the policy, and you need to publish them. So publishing them will basically make them available on end user clients. So let me just show a few things. So for instance, and once again, they will be like distributed to the certain group of users, which they can use on their own, basically, which they can use at their own discretion, or sometimes it will be automatically labeled, depends on what it is. So for instance, I can go here and I can do assign policy, and I can pick one of those custom defined labels that has been published to me. And now I think it will be fair if I show you guys the same thing, and the same thing applies to the SharePoint. So once again, basically that's the SharePoint site associated with this. And I can just go here. And let me see something.
It's at the top there, Alex.
All right. Okay, I'm not at my, all right, views. What attention, yep, right here. So I can select, I can select it from here as well. And once again, why? Because you don't want to retain the whole set of data, but there's a certain group in your organization that actually is, by the law or by the regulation is actually supposed to answer to some sort of regulation rules.
And one other question, Alex, I think that came up, you mentioned manual labeling, which you just described, that involves the end user actually setting the label and kind of keeping track. But I think what's been really popular recently and been leveraged is auto labels. And I don't know if you can show.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So as was mentioned, actually, those you can also do auto labels based on the pattern based on the pattern in the document file, Excel file, or the email. It will you can do auto apply label. And once again, basically, it's sensitive information and it brings you to the same screen. So it's very similar to another tool that I want to talk about is called Azure Information Protection, or the Office sensitivity types. It's something else I want to actually talk about probably in the future seminars. Okay, So that's auto-applied. So basically what it does, it goes and detects the certain type of the data available in this, and and basically imposes the required retention thing. Okay, so that's actually, and this is retention fee. So once again, every business is unique. You need to actually sit down with your business heads, and you need to figure out what it is worth retaining for a certain amount of time. Do you want to do it in bulk? Do you want to just define the patterns? So, and the disadvantages are actually, if you're doing it all in bulk, you may actually keep the data that's not, that's not worth being retained. You will be charged a fee for it. Okay, so one last thing actually I wanted to show you guys, and once again before we split, and there's a lot of amazing security tools that actually part of this ecosystem. There's one particular actually that I wanted to show, in that cloud application security. All right, so I'm actually gonna go there. One second, guys, I'll just bring it up. All right, takes a little bit to upload. All right, so cloud application security. Once again, this is one of those advanced tools that actually you need at least a single M365 E5 license. And with cloud application security, actually, I mean, there are a few things. I mean, I'll just tell you what they used for. So first of all, there are alerts. Anything basically that looks out of the ordinary, you can set up the custom alerts, and your company will get alerted on. Things like elevating account rights, untypical or anomaly behavior, things like aggressive uploads, the SharePoint teams, multiple login failures. Another thing it does great is actually it offers another layer of protection for your SharePoint or for your Drive for Business. So once again, let me explain you what I mean here. As we are progressing away from VPNs and from private network versus public network, as we are all in the cloud, how do we distinguish actually? How do we distinguish our computers from company computers from personal computers? And we would use an MDM tool such as Intune or Endpoints Device Manager that actually imposes the compliance on a certain device and makes them compliant. Alternatively, this device can be hybrid joined to AD, which means you install an AD sync and create the accounts from the on-prem Active Directory and shoot them up to Azure, and thus you know that actually this computer does belong to the company. And so basically the rule that I'm going to show you here will show you what can be done for instance, right now, this particular machine is not a member of my trial tenant. I'm gonna get here, gonna open up the document. And I'm going to obtain. Gonna try to do a copy. And right there, it's being blocked. Why? Because this computer is not a member of my organization. So, and once again, sometimes it's a useful thing to say, if you're not using your organizational computer, right, the corporate computer, it's fine. We can give you the access to your Teams. We can get you access to your SharePoint. You can still work in your document, but nothing leaves that session, right? So I cannot copy and paste. I cannot upload this document to my personal computer. And that's how you're 100% certain that none of your corporate sensitive data will ever end up on a personal device. And that's a huge win because, for instance, if this is a corporate computer, somebody leaves the company, I actually have the right to collect this computer from the person. If somebody uses a personal computer, legally, I have no access to this person's computer once once the information is, once the relationship is terminated, and therefore I cannot positively say what kind of information has been copied from Teams, SharePoint, emails, etc. So, and that's just one of the 100 things that MCAS can do. It can assure that you only have a read-only web session from your personal computer.
And Alex, just a question that came in. When the action is blocked, you can also view it in the MCAS dashboard, correct?
Yes. And as soon as it happens, basically set up the alert saying that copy paste action has been blocked. And once again, I mean, I don't have to collect those. I mean, because action is blocked, no harm, no foul. But some admins actually can care about those, and they want to be alerted as soon as it happens. Once again, depends on the size of your organizations and depends on what your usage traffic. You may end up with too many alerts, right? So another great thing that the MCAS is doing, it also does what is called the shadow IT discovery, which basically collects information through Defender ATP from your computers, and it gives you exact picture of what applications users use. And another great thing that a lot of people find useful, for instance, if I'm the IT director of a 100 people organization, 200 people organization, it's really hard for me to know what's people using, right? For instance, I can say, okay, everybody for the team collaborations just use Teams, but I have no eyes that a certain team just decides to use a Google Drive. So what's the problem with the Google Drive? For the personal use, there is no problem with it, right? But it's no longer an IT managed space, right? It's no longer accountable. It's no longer auditable, right? So with that, I can set up the alert and saying, hey, there is a new popular upload team in your organization. I get the alert, I see who's using this, and I go and have a conversation with the head of the department and basically restating my desire for everybody to be using Teams or SharePoint for company-wide collaboration. Another thing it does, it looks at every single application that the users have, like basically any traffic that's been sent, and I can say, okay, give me all applications that has been deemed unsafe. I can look at this application, I can say unsanction it, and this application will be blocked by Defender ATP. So, like I said, there's a lot of things, but the nice thing about it, let me just show you something. At least, I mean, what I like about it, if I look at the activity log, it gives me a very nice preview of what's going on in my environment. So there's basically a cut and paste item that's been blocked. The file has been previewed. If anything was labeled with Azure Information Protection, I'll see it here. If the label was taken down, if the label was downgraded, etc., etc. So there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that's available. But this is an advanced tool. To get started, you need at least one E5 security license, just to get those anomaly policies. And for every user you're actually monitoring, it needs its own license. All right, so as we actually stroll towards the end of our presentation, and I'm going to start taking questions, I'm just going to say that today I barely scratched the surface of even something simple as DLP and retention. That there's a lot of bells and whistles, there are a lot of intricacies into configuring those things, and yeah, I mean, send your questions. We'll be happy to get them addressed and to get them answered.
Thank you, Alex. I'll just grab the screen. I'll just share a few remaining slides, and then we can go to Q&A as we have 15 minutes left. Yeah.
I still want to say something else, and like I said in the beginning, I hope this is just the inception of us, getting together and talking, security tools. That's what we primarily specialize in.
Yes, great. No, Alex, this was really great. And I think, as Alex mentioned, the MCAS app, as we were finishing up, contains a lot of different functionality in terms of Azure Information Protection. Azure Identity, and Microsoft Cloud App Security in general. So we'll have a follow-up sessions as well to kind of go in depth in those subjects. But in terms of a current, as we conclude today's session, all of these tools and what we've been finding with Alex when we talk to our clients, all of these tools are essentially available in your existing licensing, and maybe you have to upgrade or maybe create an add-on to your current ecosystem, and you can already start leveraging them. And we'll be finding a lot of clients not aware of that. They essentially purchasing licenses and they're using the system, but they're not leveraging the MCAS tool, they're not leveraging the DLP and data loss prevention and advanced threat protection, just because they're not aware that that those tools are kind of already existing. So we just kind of want to make that aware of you guys that on the call today. All of these are part of M365 ecosystem, and they can be already used out of the box. There's some policies that we can create custom. Alex showed today a lot of it out of the box. Literally, you can just use them as they are. And we here to kind of help you guys learn and leverage these tools. Either we are kind of like trainings that we do or follow-up sessions. So definitely let us know how we can help, especially in the current environment that we are living through. Remote workspace and the remote workforce was at the highest demand that we have seen. So we want to make sure you guys have the right tool at your disposal. And so yeah, we want to thank you for attending. We'll open up for any questions right now if you have. We'll also have the recording available on demand afterwards, and any supporting information, you can reach out to us at info@spheriuminc.com. You can also check us out on our website. We are planning to host an upcoming webinar specific to Teams and kind of dive into deeper how Teams functioning, how work safely remote is configured in Teams. Teams right now has been expanding based on the current pandemic situation. So we feel like there's a lot of demand and interest how Teams can operate. So we'll be sending an upcoming webinar link in a few weeks. But if there's any questions, yeah, let us know.
Yep. Okay. Is there any questions? Okay.
And we can also, of course, create as kind of specific sessions with specific people if you guys have any interest to learn more in depth. But yeah, it was great seeing everybody.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We're about education first and foremost, basically making customers aware of things, and that's the #1 priority.
Exactly, yeah. And then Alex, just to echo what you mentioned, as I was saying, a lot of customers, they use Microsoft tools or Azure, and they're just not aware of some of these tools that they can leverage that's already being included in their subscription. So our job is to educate and help you guys get going. And we know there's a lot of going on right now, so we definitely happy to help. In addition to services that we offer, we have a kind of a wide variety of IT and development services that we can also help leverage. So do let us know.
Okay. Great. If you guys don't have any questions, we're gonna actually have you start your weekend a little early. So have a safe 4th, and hope to chat with you again, guys.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Alex. And then yeah, happy 4th, everyone. We'll follow up with you by mail, and then if any questions, we're here. Thanks everyone for attending.
Bye.
Bye, guys.